Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and we're going to be doing another video in the same week. In fact, if all things go according to plan, this video will come out the day after my last video, the Acrobat dedication. Isn't that nuts? Isn't that crazy? I'm excited to be doing a couple videos in a week. And as I mentioned in the last video, these videos are a little bit easier to edit. Obviously, they don't have as much as a full class does, so it gives me time to research the information, and I can pretty much deliver everything the archetype has to offer without really missing much, and it's still going to be a shorter video. So yeah, we'll try this out. We'll see. I'm not going to make any promises. I will try to keep to at least 2 videos a week, but if I can make this third video work, I'm all for it. But enough chit chat, let's get to the show. And today we're going to be talking about the Aldori Sword Duelist. So this particular dedication has some in-lore ramifications for the Pathfinder world of Golarion, and more specifically the continent of Aviston in the Broken Lands, which is the northeastern section of the map. Now, to be an Aldori Sword Lord, one must sign the sword Pact, and when you do, you take on the surname of Aldori. So if your character is an official Aldori Sword Duelist, your last name is going to be Aldori, because that's what signing the sword Pact kind of infers. Now, that's not to say you can't make a character who's stolen the secrets of the Aldori, or one who is shamed and forbidden from signing the sword Pact, but not without walking away with some of their techniques. There's a variety of ways to do this. It is an uncommon archetype, so your DM has the freedom to tell you, no, I don't want you to use this for probably some lore reasons in the campaign. But nonetheless, it has a requirement that you have to be from the Broken Lands. Makes sense. That's where the Sword Pact is signed. That's where the Sword Lords are found. And honestly, if you really dive into the Aldori Sword Lords and their lore, it's very, very interesting. I highly recommend it, but this is not a lore video. I just wanted to mention that so that you have an idea why it's called what it's called and why it has the requirements that it does. Now, we can't talk about the dedication without talking about the sword in question, which is the Aldori Duelist Sword. It is a finesse weapon, a D8, which is really good for, rogues especially, and it has the versatile P, so it does slashing and piercing damage. A very good sword overall. Now, I would argue that the rapier is a little bit better. The rapier gives you a deadly D8, and it has disarm on it, but the rapier does not have a whole archetype dedication dedicated to it. So, technically the Aldori Duelist Sword is the better weapon overall if you're an Aldori Sword Duelist. It's a mouthful, to say the least. But let's talk about what the actual dedication gives you now. So the dedication itself is a little weird in my opinion. First and foremost, I want to mention something that's strange. The dedication itself requires that you are trained in the Aldori Duelist Sword, but the dedication gives you access to it. Now, there is a little bit of a difference between access and requirement. For instance, access just means this is available to you, like innately. Like being from the Broken Lands gives you access to this archetype dedication, for instance. This means that you can buy, like in-game mechanics, this means that you can buy Aldori, dueling swords wherever you go, equivalently. That's pretty much the only way it makes sense in the game, and it allows you to have the weapon in case you lose it wherever you go. Because honestly, you can't use a lot of the feats from this dedication without doing so. So it gives you unique access to doing so. The prerequisite that you have it trained is odd from a narrative perspective, but, I'm assuming they want you to take a feat a general feat to get the ability to use the sword. And technically, any martial class, I believe it's one second, let me check the sword real quick here. It's just an uncommon. Oh, it is an advanced weapon as well. So you do need to have advanced weapon training if you want to get the Aldori Duelist sword. So fighters specifically, I believe you can also gain access to it with a general feat. Now, overall, personally, I would say if you're going to take the Aldori Duelist dedication, you gain access to the weapon and training proficiency in it. Not only that, but anytime your class will give you proficiency in melee weapons, expert or higher, it also increases your Aldori Duelist sword proficiency, which is good because it counts as an advanced weapon. And even fighters have advanced weapons at one rank lower than they can use most other weapons standardly. So it's a really good feature to have on it. Overall, it's just a lot of requirements. The sword is not that strong. It's a D8 finesse weapon, yes, but there's also the rapier, which doesn't have nearly as many requirements. So, I don't think it's overall a big deal. And the Aldori, dueling sword only is good if you're taking the archetype. But why would you take the archetype if you had a hard time accessing the sword in the first place? Overall, it's really weird. But once you get past all of that nonsense with your DM, clarify with them, obviously. You also get training in acrobatics or athletics, your choice, and dueling lore. Dueling lore is very interesting because, at least as I've interpreted so far, you're able to identify any styles another character is using, anything they would use in a duel, society-based roles. Not only that, but you could use the dueling lore to find out information about the style's history and maybe even what it's capable of. There are a variety of other styles, I do believe, in the game currently, and if not, they'll add more with some of the other, campaign modules or some of the books as well. We'll add some interesting one. The World Guide specifically, I'm sure, had one other one. But, in any regard, it's a really cool lore. I think it's very flavorful, adds to your character's background. And who knows, it could be something that could come up. Maybe you're in a tournament and you notice someone is using a unique fighting style or gets into a stance. It's a really interesting lore. And if you're already trained in acrobatics or athletics, or is it both? Yeah, if you're already trained in, I guess any of them, you become an expert instead. So overall, the dedication is pretty standard. You get a good skill increase or gain a skill from it. You gain 2 skills from it potentially, or it 2 increases, depending on, I guess, how you set your character up. It's a level, archetypes, you pick it at level 2. So it is indeed possible for you to have dueling lore and, acrobatics or athletics at level 1. And then when you level up, you could increase both to expert. Pretty good overall. The Aldori dueling sword can be really good, and especially if you're using this archetype, it's a pretty good one. Definitely a weapon I would like to see done on rogues, and I think Ranger has a really good build with the Aldori dueling swords, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Let's go ahead and get on to the next feat. Aldori Parry. This is just a superior parry to any other parry kind of weapon. So first of all, this allows you to parry with the Aldori dueling sword, essentially giving it an additional trait, because the Aldori dueling sword doesn't innately have the parry trait. Now, when a weapon does have the parry trait, it gives you a circumstance bonus of only +1 when you're wielding the weapon. With the Aldori dueling sword, you get a +2. Granted, you can't be wielding anything in your other hand. That's not necessarily a bad thing, though. With the way the action economy works in Pathfinder, typically there's not many ways you can attack with 2 swords unless you're, a flurry ranger or some other kind of dual weapon fighter. I think even the dual weapon fighter archetype has something like that as well. Regardless, for most standard characters, it's not a big deal if you're only wielding one weapon, and it's pretty good, especially considering you essentially get a sword and a shield all built into one. The Aldori dueling sword really, really benefits from this one feat alone, and it makes it just a superior weapon to the rapier overall. Duelist's Edge is a free action you use when you roll initiative to get a +2 circumstance bonus and draw your weapon. Now, most combats, it's assumed that when you engage with your opponents and you're not surprised, you get to draw your weapon as a free action. It makes sense. It doesn't make sense to really muddle up the beginning of combat by forcing you to draw a weapon, but, you know, at the very least, if you're surprised and your weapon is not drawn for whatever reason, when you do get to roll initiative after the combat round, you can draw your sword as a part of your initiative, and you get a +2 circumstance bonus, which is pretty good. This pretty much matches the fighter's battlefield surveyor feature, which allows them to get that same +2 circumstance bonus to initiative, and it's the same as the general feat Incredible Initiative, which does the same thing. So again, having just the Aldori dueling sword and the dedication, obviously, you get essentially another feat mixed in with it. That is really solid overall. The Aldori sword duelist is super solid for any character who wants a good combat line of feats that really helps them in physical combat, and this can allow them to focus some of their feats elsewhere. Investigator actually would be really good with this, wouldn't it? Yeah, because the Investigator has a lot of feats that are kind of not focused around combat, so taking the Aldori sword, dedication allows them to have some really good combat feats mixed in with their pretty high utility feats. That's another really good class combo. That's really cool. Aldori Riposte is a really strong, reaction you get to use whenever an enemy crit fails to hit you with a weapon, or I think any attack, really. Yep, just crit fails a strike against you, and they're within your reach, obviously. You can strike or disarm them. Now, disarm is a really terrible action. I'm just saying it right now. Disarm's a really, really terrible action to have. But it can be a little helpful, I suppose. I don't know. I don't like the disarm action at all in Pathfinder. I think it needs to be fixed or something. I understand disarming your opponent's weapon is hard and a little rough, but, a trip does almost worse, putting you in a bad position, flat-footed equivalently, and you still have to stand up to really do much of anything. So I feel like actually disarming a weapon into the square is reasonable, but, I didn't design the game. I don't know the design principles. Anyway, the Aldori Riposte is very solid. It allows you to strike an enemy when they critically fail against you. It's statistically likely to happen, and depending on how combat heavy your sessions are, it can be once every 3 sessions that this will go off. It's pretty good, honestly. It's not as good as Attack of Opportunity per se, but Attack of Opportunity isn't really good against an enemy that's squared up against you, because obviously they don't want to move and have no reason to use manipulate actions unless they're also a spellcaster. So this is honestly a really good feature, and honestly you might get it off more than fighters would. It's solid overall. Oh yes, I forgot to mention as well. You have to be benefiting from your parry when you're doing this, but that's okay. You should always use your third action for the parry if you're not using it to move. You should never attack 3 times if you got a good thing like this parry that gives you a +2 circumstance bonus and allows you to get this riposte off. Unnerving Prowess is good. It's really good. Your character's swordsmanship is so awesome that you intimidate your foes. When you critically strike an enemy or critically succeed on a disarm check, you can free action demoralize the enemy. It is a free demoralize action. It's really good, and the best part about it is you essentially get the benefit of intimidating glare. It doesn't have the auditory trait, and they don't have to understand your language. You're just such a badass that your swordsmanship intimidates the enemy and they cower in fear. It's so good. It's really good if you want your character to be very show-offy or very dominating in combat. It's a really good feature overall, and not only that, but it can be done with your reaction because the Aldori Riposte allows you to strike and or disarm. All you have to do is crit, free action, demoralize. It's very efficient. The Aldori Sword Duelist is really, really good, and we just got one more feat we have to go over. Saving Slash is just really good backup in case something goes terribly wrong. It allows you to, when you get critically hit, use your reaction to spin your blade and try to deflect the blow to at least turn it into a normal strike against you. Now, it's a DC 16 flat check. Not the best. You have a 20% chance of success, which means an 80% chance of failure. But if it does go off, it can save you a lot of damage. And honestly, it's just one of those things that when it comes up, you probably want to use it, even if it's wasting your reaction. It's not a waste to prevent your character from taking massive damage. So overall, I think it's a really good one. It helps round out the Aldori Sword Duelist overall. And honestly, I love this dedication. It's really good mostly for martial classes, obviously, because if you're going to be focusing on using a sword, you want to at least be able to get up to master proficiency with it so that you can benefit at the end game with your sword. You don't want it to become obsolete, obviously. And also, this particular archetype dedication comes with a background. It comes with a location in the world that your character, has to have at least heard of or been to, most likely been to, if you signs the Sword Pact. It's really, really good. This one archetype dedication is exactly what I mentioned in the last video. It's got a lot of flavor, and this one, just by chance, also is just very effective in combat. Whether you're playing an investigator, a rogue, or a ranger, I think all three benefit heavily from the Aldori Sword Duelist archetype dedication if you're looking to add a little bit more punch, a little bit more combat finesse to your overall character style. This one archetype dedication allows you to focus more on some of the other options, whether it's some of the really good rogue-based feats for thievery or for all kinds of shenanigans they can do in combat, whether you're a ranger and you're taking the precision edge, which allows your Aldori sword to do an additional D8 damage with the first strike every combat round, which is really, really good, or even flurry if you're planning on making lots of attacks. Personally, I think precision's a little bit better in this case, but flurry is always going to be a pretty standardly good one. And honestly, Investigator has nothing but utility in their pocket for everything else in the game. They do suffer a little bit when it comes to combat-based feats. The Aldori Sword Duelist allows you to pretty much round out your Investigator to have a very strong, competent melee character, in addition to the fact that they are a much more studious and observant style character. Overall, I absolutely love this dedication. If you have any interesting builds, let me know. And of course, I guess I should state in every one of these videos, please convince your DMs to use the free archetype bonus. It's really, really good. Personally, I use it in all my games. I do have a stipulation that I don't allow multi-class archetype dedications for the free archetype bonus, because it makes your characters more interesting and allows you to take something like the Aldori Sword Duelist that has a lot of in-world application as well. And even if you want to remove the Aldori name, maybe it doesn't fit in your world, and maybe you have a game that's not in Galarian, this style can be placed into any sword dueling style that may exist in your world. It's honestly really good narratively and combat-wise. I think the only thing it lacks is it doesn't offer any utility, but why would it? It's a sword dueling style. It's not meant for anything but dueling with weapons. Also, do not underestimate dueling lore. Dueling lore is actually really, really cool when you start thinking about it and when you start using it, because when it comes up, you're going to feel like a boss. But with that, that's going to be in the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.